Senior writer from Sports Illustrated, David Epstein, watching last night, has written books on Alex Rodriguez and also Lance Armstrong, and he joins us on the program. How did Lance come off last night, David?
Personally, I don't think it went very well for him. I mean, it was amazing after 15 years of deny to see him bluntly admit that he'd been doping, but he avoided certain subjects. I mean, when his first admission back in the hospital room when he had cancer came up, he basically said, "I'm laying down on that one," and just refused to answer it. And so I think people were looking to see would he be coming fully clean, and clearly he didn't. And to see if he started making specific apologies to people who he tried to ruin their lives when he knew they were telling the truth, and in large part, he didn't. So I think, sort of gauging the Twitter sphere of people who are following this, it did not go well for him.
Unanswered questions. If I said there are two of them, what would be the biggest two? You did mention some things here. What else didn't have an answer that matched up?
Well, first of all, he said that he did not dope after his comeback, which is important for a number of reasons. One, if he's trying to get a reduced ban, that would sort of change the starting line for it. So he said the last time he doped was 2005, and his blood profile would beg to differ, that he doped even after his comeback. And so I think there's reason to believe that he's still not telling the full truth, and he sort of hasn't gotten into the issues with the Cancer Foundation where, there are kind of misconceptions about what the foundation did in terms of donating to cancer research, and I think a lot of people are curious when he decided to start leveraging cancer survivors sort of as part of his cover-up, basically.
Expectations for tonight from Lance and Oprah?
I think it's going to be a lot more emotional. They're going to talk about, I know for a fact, they're going to talk about, him thinking of confronting his kids, to having to tell his children, that he made a mistake and things like that. And we're going to see some more emotion from him and less kind of the run-of-the-mill doping questions. So I think it'll be interesting to see if, despite the fact that for everyone who's followed this closely, it's quite clear that he's still telling some lies, it will be interesting to see whether some true emotion from him that we haven't seen before sort of, soften some of his detractors, I guess.
What's next for Lance Armstrong?
Well, I think this is, I don't think this is going to be the step in his rehabilitation that he hoped it would be publicly. So I think he's not a guy who sits back and lets the story run him. He wants to run the story, and he wants to be in the spotlight, and he wants to get back to competing. And if he wants to get back to competing, he's going to have to go testify under oath against people in the highest level of organized cycling. And so I think he's going to have to decide if he wants to do that. And he's got a lot of court in front of him, too. So there's some of that. That's going to be, triathlons and court is going to be in his future.
I was saying to these guys that he controlled it last night. Oprah asked the questions, but Lance controlled that interview, that he knew what the questions were going to be. He knew where he was going to go, where he couldn't go. You don't want to sound scripted. You want to sound like you're contrite, that you're real. But I think anybody who knows Lance Armstrong knows last night he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what the end game was. What was your takeaway from the overall feel of that interview?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think he chose Oprah for a reason, right? They're friends. Last time she interviewed him, he was under a federal investigation, and she didn't ask a single question about that. I think she asked a lot of good questions, but he seemed to be able to avoid having her follow up on things. Like a couple times when he just said, "Yeah, I'm not really gonna talk about that," and she didn't sort of seem equipped to follow up on it. So, I think she asked a lot of great questions, but I do think he was able to sidestep sort of at his will when he wanted to.
Now, you co-wrote a Sports Illustrated cover story that was almost a year ago to the day. The case against Lance Armstrong, or was that 2 years ago? The case against the case against Lance Armstrong. Did you hear back from Lance or his people after you co-wrote that article?
Oh yeah, I mean, we were constant. So Lance refused to do a direct interview with Selena Roberts and I, who wrote the article, but we were hearing from his people constantly in the form of either, suggestions that they would sue us or things like that. I mean, it was like stacks and stacks of paper were arriving at our office. I think there was one of the things that was interesting we got was a packet about one of our sources that was titled, like, Mike Anderson's complete lack of credibility. And it's like a packet they have ready to go out to journalists who are working on stories like this. So we were in touch with them constantly. But it was just kind of the same old, same old. He took to his media friends and tried to discredit us, and did the same, tried to discredit us to our bosses as well, actually.
I give you one question for Lance. What is it?
I think, how could you have tried to completely destroy the lives of people that you now admit you knew were telling the truth all along? I want to hear him answer that, because to me, this isn't really a doping story in a lot of ways. It's a bullying and human vileness story that goes beyond any of the doping stories we've seen before.
David, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
David Epstein, senior writer from Sports Illustrated.